I don't think President Trump, who is certainly not a student of European history, culture, economics, geography, ever really understood the complexity of the issues in Ukraine. I don't think he completely grasped what he was dealing with. Whether or not he does now is open to question, but he certainly did not until he got to Alaska. If you're sitting in Moscow and you're looking at events, you're saying, well, first of all, we had a good meeting with President Trump and his team. Remember, they met previously in Saudi Arabia, and on both occasions, both teams said they'd made some progress in the direction of normalizing relations with Russia, and that's something that President Trump has said he wanted to do. Having done that, that of course did not address Ukraine. And I think he decided that, I can't fix Ukraine. I can't solve this, which is something he should have understood from the beginning. I think he does understand that. On the other hand, I think he's being advised by people who are telling him, well, you can't just walk away. And remember, that was what I urged from the beginning, very early on to President Trump was, look, let's leave this. Announce you're suspending all further armaments. We'll send humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainians. But the best way to end this war is to stop the flow of cash and weapons to Ukraine. At that point, the war has to stop because the Ukrainians really are at the end of their tether as it is. The Russians will then begin to take us seriously. I think he's been urged by everybody on the Hill and elsewhere not to do that. Now, this latest announcement is horrific. The notion that we would send thousands of cruise missiles over there is insane to begin with. Secondly, it's not going to happen very quickly because we can't build that many in the time that remains for Ukraine. So I think the Russians are looking at this and saying, we don't have any choice anymore. We've got to end this war. So we're going to press ahead. Now, what does press ahead mean? Well, they've already got special operations forces on the outskirts of Odessa. They've already destroyed all potential military targets in and around Odessa. They're going to move towards Zaporizhia. They're going to get complete control of Kherson, all of the areas in southern Ukraine. There's no choice in that matter. And eventually, I think we'll see them occupy Odessa. I've always felt that way. They've said that for the last 3 years. And you'll remember that Russians were herded into buildings in Odessa and then burned alive by the Ukrainians down there. That's something the Russians have never forgotten, and I would not forget that either. So I think those things are on the table. The question is, do you cross the river in strength and go north to Kiev? In other words, you eliminate the cancer because they don't want to refight this war in the future. And now it seems that MI6 in London is very interested in pushing this man Zelensky, who is ostensibly their puppet. That's not going to fly with Moscow. They will not accept that under any circumstances. And then finally, at least President Trump has now said there will be no U.S. forces on the ground in Ukraine. The president of Poland, who is very much an important actor in all of this, has said no Polish troops on the ground in Ukraine. And as I've said from the very beginning, you didn't have Poland at this summit in the White House. Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, they border Ukraine. They are key to the outcome. They've been treated as though they're second-class citizens, irrelevant. They have to be on board for whatever happens in Ukraine. So I think that summit in the White House was a serious mistake. The people that came in there were a disaster because they have nothing at stake. What they say is irresponsible. Starmer talking about what? 30,000 British troops? Good luck. The British Army, as you and I both know, is a shadow of its former self. It's in bad shape. It's really tragic. The same thing is true in France. As a friend of mine in the French Army says, the only thing we're prepared to do is go on safari in Africa. 300,000 troops that would operate effectively along the border of Ukraine to guarantee anything. And then finally, the Russians have said, if you move any troops in there from Western Europe, that's a red line for us. You make yourselves a co-belligerent, we'll attack you. Who is going to determine the outcome? Russia. How will it be determined? On the ground in Ukraine. End of discussion. And in the meantime, NATO is falling apart. Anybody who thinks that's robust and capable is crazy. The same thing is true for the EU. If you live in Hungary and Slovakia and Poland, you're being told you need to accept 1 million people from Africa, the Middle East, and Southwest Asia. These people have said, no, thank you. We're not interested in that. We see what's happened in Great Britain. We've seen what's happened in Germany and Italy and France. We don't want that here. Everything is falling apart in the West. Nothing is working. So, in the final analysis, Russia is winning this war and it will determine the outcome. We won't.